In this first sentence, this is very important. This probably gives a very good example of why it's good to go to the Hebrew. Go into the Hebrew and look at what it's saying. Let's look at this up on the screen. Yes, Bereshith bara Elohim et Hashamayim. Okay? That doesn't say a whole lot when we don't know the Hebrew, but one thing that's important here is these two words. Elohim, Elohim is plural for Eloah. Eloah. So this is a representation of the Father and the Son. This is Yeshua says, I and the Father are one. And right after that, you have Aleph and Tav, the beginning and the end. The reference for Yeshua. Now we'll start off first this morning with John 1:1-5.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it.
Now you see on this board over here, I don't know if those you can see it. You got the Aleph and Tav right here. The first and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Let's go to Revelation 22:13.
I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last.
Now, Yochanan on the island of Patmos would not have written, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm sorry. That sounds like something from Star Wars. If you read Josephus, the writings of the time, of that time around 70 AD, when the destruction of the temple was, he wrote down in his book that the rabbis and the leaders of the time, the people that were the Hebrew people, would rather feed their kids pork than teach them Greek. Because at the time in that age, Greek represented liberalism. This is where gymnasiums started, and guys running around naked together. A lot of things that were abomination to God that Roman Greco-culture promoted. So in the English in Revelation 22:13, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. And then I go right over here next to it in my Hebrew. So you got Hebrew column on the other side over here. It happened in Hebrew. It says, Ani ha'alef af ani ha'tav. I am the Aleph and I am the Tav. That's what Yeshua would have said. We go to the rest of the scriptures to verify it. Remember John 10:30.
I and my Father are one.
You have to carry that in your head as you study scriptures. One thing I want to say, the importance of sitting down during the week and reading the Torah Parsha. It's on the calendars. There's no excuse not to read it unless there's idolatry, something more important than God's Word. You sit and study the Parsha, read it out, let it hit you. You know, wash your hands, wash your face, anoint yourself with the oil, go sit down and read the Parsha. Because after a year of that, you will make Aliyah. But if you don't do it, and apathetic, nothing will change in your life. John was a Hebrew on Patmos. He was not a Greek scholar. He was a man of God that was given a vision on the island of Patmos because, you know why he was on the island of Patmos? Because they tried to cook him in a boiling pot of oil and it wouldn't cook him. They pulled him out and he was fine. They had to get rid of him. So they took him out to the island of Patmos and said, go. They were scared of him. They came back later, and they got him. His people came back and got him. And he died a very, very old man. And he was the only apostle that didn't suffer martyr, wasn't butchered for the sake of the truth. He died at a very old age, natural death. But his vision was very powerful. And many translators down through the ages and Europeans tried to Hellenize him. And this was a perfect example of it right here. Colossians 1. Now, before we start this, one understanding with to get a wrap around this whole book, this whole scroll of Bereshith, Genesis, covers a span of 2,200 years. So you got to understand what's going on here. The scroll ends. It starts out with the creation, and it ends with the patriarchal family becoming a nation ready to stand a terrible exile. Creation was completed after the people were completed. They were ready to go into the Exodus. So when we look at the Hebrew here, we see Elohim in the plural form, and we see the Aleph and Tav. Colossians 1, 15 through 18.
He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence.
He is the image of the invisible God and the firstborn over all creation. And he is the head of the body. I took that part down there where it said, and he is the head of the body, the church. And I drew a line through that word, church. That's anti-Semitism. Always understand, the Vatican, the Catholic influence started in the 3rd century. It did not start with the apostles. They were not the first Catholics. But this right here is the same words, the same letters as 2,000 years ago, unchanged. Every Torah scroll that's written by a professional sefer is exactly the same as the one before, and the one before, and the one before, and the one before, because they know. So it's very important to understand, in the Hebrew contains the secrets of the kingdom. The Hebrew is very important. It's the oldest language. But when I was looking at this Colossians 1:15, I couldn't help but looking up at Colossians 1:9. And you don't have to bring it up because it's not on the list. I'll just read it. For this reason, we also, since the day we heard it, do not cease to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will. How do we get the knowledge of his will? Do we dream it up? No. The knowledge of his will is contained in there. In all wisdom and all spiritual understanding, that you may walk worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing him. Now, if we go by some other doctrine or some other theology, is that fully pleasing him? No. No. May walk worthy of the Lord. See, that word walk in Hebrew is halakha. Halakha means a way of living, not just footsteps in the dirt. Walk in Scripture, may walk worthy of the Lord means may live, be an action, a verb for Elohim, according to what he prescribes us to live according to. Fully pleasing him, being fruitful in every good work and increasing, not just how you are, stay put, but increasing in the knowledge of God. Very important that we increase in the knowledge of God. Increase in it. Strengthened with all might according to his glorious power. For all patience and long-suffering with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the Torah, in the ways of God. That's what the light means. The light doesn't mean that you make yourself so bright that you put glow dust on you. No. It means we have the Word, a way of life, the walk according to Him, walk according to what's pleasing to Him, and giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the Kedoshim that walk in the light, that walk in the Torah. He has delivered us from the power of darkness, confusion, life without His order, and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of His love, in whom we have redemption through His blood, the forgiveness of sins. So if you look at that set of verses Hebraically, the word walk, and the word increase, and the word light, means something we're to improve in. A way of life we're to improve in. So it's very important when we look at these things. I'm amazed every week. More stuff and more stuff jumps out at me. It shows me for the early translators, when they went from the Hebrew to the Greek, it did a 180. And then from the Greek to the English, it really got watered down. So we have to always remember that. Those are three completely different cultures. So thank God we still have the Hebrew. Even though that's not paleo, some people won't even look at that unless it's paleo. But that's a pride issue of theirs. This is what was Yeshua read. We've got a picture of it right back on the table, back on the counter back there, of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the font that he would have read. So it's real important to understand that when we get to looking at this, we have to take our mind out of this culture and apply it the way it was applied back then. Because until you know the manners, the customs, and the idioms, and the language, and the people, and the times of the land, you won't get the whole message. That's why so many of them back then, that's why there was 3,000 added in one day. Because they knew what they were talking about. They didn't come out of an American culture in Acts 2. Those were people that knew the Torah. They knew the instructions of God. They knew the difference between light and dark. Chaos and disorder. But this is what it says in here. The word for darkness is choshek. Choshek. Choshek also means confusion. So when you put that word confusion in there and order, light is order, it comes off of or. That's where we get our word order. God is a God of order, and it's very important to get these things straight in our head. Back to the Aleph and Tav, Proverbs 30, verse 4.
Who has ascended into heaven or descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has bound the waters in a garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is his son's name, if you know?
Isaiah 41:4.
Who has performed and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, am the first, and with the last I am he.
Isaiah 44:6.
Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel, and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am the first and I am the last. Besides me there is no God.
You know, he's saying, I'm the first and I'm the last. Besides me there is no God. What did we start off with? Genesis 1:1? Aleph and Tav. Where did we read in the last? In Revelation 22. At the end. Aleph and Tav. We get it in the first sentence of the whole Bible, and we get it in the last chapter of the whole Bible. He says, I am the beginning and I am the end. I am the Aleph and the Tav. Isaiah 48:12.
Listen to me, O Yaakov and Israel, my called. I am he, I am the first, I am also the last.
Revelation 1:11.
Saying, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what you see, write in a book and send it to the 7 churches which are in Asia, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamos, to Thyatira, to Sardis, to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea.
See, he's saying, when he's saying I'm the first and I'm the last, he's saying I was at creation and I'm going to be there when things are reversed, when things are rectified and the planet is mikvah again. Revelation 2:8.
To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things says the first and the last, who was dead and came to life.
And then we have what we just read, Revelation 22:13. The way that what I'm going to go to right here now, since it's been mentioned a couple times, is this one word, church. They put this word in there to change the believers, the pattern and the focus, the description of the people of the way. If you'll notice the way kahal, which means an assembly, kahal is translated in the New Testament to church. It gives a different meaning of believers. Instead of 7 churches, it says Shiva Hakilot, which is a masculine. Ot is masculine plural. It's meaning the 7 completed assemblies. The 7 assemblies, the 7 communities. It never said back then, he never did say church. Never did. In the Hebrew, it's kahila or kahal. The 7 communities or the 7 that are paused for completion. Kahilot. In the word ha-kahilot, there is a Shiva under the call. In the renewed covenant, the New Testament, it is the translation of the Greek word ecclesia, which is synonymous with or from the Hebrew word kahal, which means community, congregation, or assembly of the Hebrew body of people who are the keepers of the Torah. Now in Acts, we have an interesting thing. In Acts 13:42-43.
So when the Jews went out of the synagogue, the Gentiles begged that these words might be preached to them the next Shabbat. Now when the congregation had broken up, many of the Yehudi and devout proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of God.
2 words we have here that are very important. Synagogue and congregation. They were together. And this has been written that in Acts we have the usage of kahal, congregation connected to where the first believers met in a synagogue. In Acts 8:3.
As for Shaul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committed them to prison.
He wasn't persecuting Christians. He was persecuting Torah-observant people who believed in Yeshua, that were completed. They were striving to become completed. And he was persecuting them because he was messing up the franchise. So now we see how by throwing in the word church and throwing out assembly or kahal, we are presented with a change of lifestyle and faith, away from the truth of Elohim and man, forming a different belief system. Because nowhere in the Tanakh, which is the Old Testament, is there a word church. So by now, by seeing that they throw in the word church and throw out the word kahal, we are presented with a change of lifestyle and faith away from the truth of Elohim and man, forming a different belief system. Remember Proverbs 14:12.
There's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death.
And this is what was going on for hundreds of years. After 300 AD, after it all started changing, there was a way that seemed right to the man. And those ways are of death. This goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. And they got exiled. for thinking they were doing the right thing, going by their own thoughts. So let's go back to Genesis 1 through 19. So the evening and the morning were the first day. This is where we get Erev Shabbat. God's time starts, I'm recapping, so a lot of you already know this, but God's time with the day starts in the evening. And the morning were the first day, Yom Echad. And then we go down here to verse 14, because that's what people say. You're going to do Sabbath. Why are you doing Sabbath Friday night? Why do you start Sabbath at Friday night? We've had that asked. You say, because to God, his days start evening to morning. Throughout that day until that next evening. The 24-hour cycle is evening to evening. Is for God. That's the way he counts his days. And that's the way the ancients always looked at it. And that's the way they still look at it in Israel. Now on verse 14, then God said, let there be lights for the firmament of the heavens, to divide the day from the night, and let it be for signs and seasons. Moedim. So our English translators just said seasons. For signs and seasons. Which makes one think of just the 4 seasons of the year. But he created the moon for our clock, for our calendar. The Shabbat was created on the 7th day. But the moon was created for the Moedim. Because he said they would go out, they have a man watching for the new moon, Rosh Chodesh. As soon as he sees the new moon, he blows the shofar. The night he blows the shofar, the man designated to see the new moon, from that time they count to the next new moon. Then they know 1 month went by. God said count 7th month from Aviv. From Aviv brings us to the season right now. The 15th day of the 7th month will be Sukkot. So no one can ever lose track of the Moedim. And we also know that no one lost track of the Shabbat. Proverbs 8:22-36. This is a very beautiful set of verses. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his way, before his works of old. I have been established from everlasting, from the beginning, before there was ever an earth. When there was no depth, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. While as yet he had not made the earth or the fields, or the primal dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he drew the circle on the face of the deep. When he established the clouds above. When he strengthened the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limits, so that the waters would not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth, when I was beside him as a master craftsman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and my delight was with the sons of men. Now therefore listen to me, my children, for blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not disdain it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, watching at the posts of my doors. Whoever finds me finds a life, and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who sins against me wrongs his own soul. All those who hate me love death. Very simple set of instructions. Blessed are those who keep my ways. There's only one way to find out his ways. Just as the existence of a house testifies to the builder, and the garment testifies to the weaver, so the existence of the world testifies to Elohim, who designed it and created it. Whoever teaches a child the Torah's account of creation is to be considered as having continued creation itself. To shape the moral imagination of a child according to the Torah is considered creating a new world. So it's very important for those who are raising up children, raising up little ones, and raising people up to line their morals up to the ways of God. But when you do so, you're considered as creating a new world inside that child. And this was the whole purpose of creation. To create a people to carry out the will of God on this planet. He built the world, he fashioned it according to the Torah, so that he could create man to go to that world and live according to the Torah. So it's all designed together for one purpose, to glorify him. Because God knew if he could get a group of people to live on the planet he created according to his ways, that's the only way he's going to get glorified. Is by having the people live according to his will. And I appreciate everybody coming in this season. There's a lot of people who really like to go camping, and I can't blame them. It's nice out there. We live in a beautiful place. In Yeshua's name. Thank you.
This Haftorah portion is found in Isaiah 42, verse 5 to 43, verse 10. Thus says God the Lord, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread forth the earth and that which comes from it, who gives breath to the people on it, and the spirit to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness, and will hold your hand. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the prison, those who sit in darkness from the prison house. I am the Lord, that is my name. And my glory I will not give to another, nor my praise to carved images. Behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things I declare. Before they spring forth, I tell you of them. Sing for the Lord a new song, and his praise from the end of the earth. You go down to the sea, and all that is in it, you coastlands, and you inhabitants of them. Let the wilderness and its cities lift up their voice, the villages that Kedar inhabits. Let the inhabitants of Selah sing. Let them shout from the top of the mountains. Let them give glory to the Lord, and declare his praise to the coastlands. The Lord shall go forth like a mighty man. He shall stir up his zeal like a man of war. He shall cry out, yes, shout aloud. He shall prevail against his enemies. I have held my peace a long time, and have been still and restrained myself. Now I cry like a woman in labor. I will pant and gasp at once. I will lay waste the mountains and hills, and dry up all their vegetation. I will make the rivers coastlands, and I will dry up the pools. I will bring the blind in a way that they did not know. I will lead them in paths they have not known. I will make darkness light before them, and crooked places straight. These things I will do for them, and not forsake them. They shall be turned back. They shall be greatly ashamed, who trust in the carved images, who say to the molded images, you are our gods. Hear, you deaf, and look, you blind, that you may see. Who is blind but my servant, or deaf as my messenger whom I sent? Who is blind as he who is perfect, and blind as the Lord's servant? Seeing many things, but you do not observe, opening the ears, but he does not hear. The Lord is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will exalt the law and make it honorable. But this is a people robbed and plundered. All of them are snared in holes. And they are hidden in prison houses. They are for prey, and no one delivers. For plunder, and no one says restore. Who among you will give ear to this? Who will listen and hear for the time to come? Who gave Jacob for plunder and Israel to robbers? Was it not the Lord, he against whom we have sinned? for they would not walk in his ways, nor were they obedient to his law. Therefore he has poured on him the fury of his anger, and the strength of battle. It has set him on fire all around. Yet he did not know, and it burned him. Yet he did not take it to heart. But now, thus says the Lord, who created you, O Jacob, and he who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, nor shall the flames scorch you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I gave Egypt for your ransom, Ethiopia and Seba in your place. Since you were precious in my sight, you have been honored, and I have loved you. Therefore I will give men for you and people for your life. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your descendants from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth, everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory. I have formed him, yes, I have made him. Bring out the blind who have eyes, and the deaf who have ears. Let all the nations be gathered together, and let the people be assembled. Who among them can declare this, and show us former things? Let them bring out their witnesses, that they may be justified. Or let them hear and say, it is true. You are my witnesses, says the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that you may know and believe me, and understand that I am he. Before me there was no God formed, nor shall there be after me. Very short commentary on this, and the Haftarah is guiding Israel through the Torah when they cannot recite it. He begins this with a creation. When he says, thus says the Lord God who created the heavens and stretched them out. This is one of my favorite times in the cycle, Bereshith, and one of the reasons is I don't always think we understand the depths of creation. And when I say the depths of creation, when he refers to creating heaven and earth, he goes from creating heaven and earth to creating the souls and the spirit of man. Now, I don't think he's jumping. I think he's putting it alongside. Because the creation of the nafshi, of the neshama of mankind, is equivalent to him creating the earth and the universe and the stars. The same sort of power that he had over nature to create the heavens and the earth, to create land and sea, is the very same power that he put into creating your soul and your breath. One of the things that I find his creation is magnificent. Identical twins have the same DNA, but they do not have the same fingerprints. There are no two fingerprints alike, and there never has been. And that is a God that is not limited by options. When you realize the number of people who have come and gone, and none of them have the same shape, the same form, the same spirit, the same breath. And you can truly get lost in that thought about how magnificent and the depth of creation. The Haftarah goes into a lot of other things about the cycle of rebellion of his people, but he's always there to restore them. He's always there to restore their uniqueness and their identity. And he preserves that uniqueness, and that uniqueness keeps coming back. Just as unique as your fingerprints are, that is the uniqueness of his people, that he continues over centuries to subject them to be plundered because they have stepped out of his ways, and yet preserve them to bring the ways back and to be his people again. Anyway, thank you very much.